Back up to 3-month highs as the war in Iran weighs on the housing market. Let's take a closer look at the state of housing into the key spring selling season. Brad Case joins us now. He's the chief residential economist at Homes.com. So let's just start with the overall dynamics, Brad, that are kind of most prevalent, let's say, in the U.S. housing market as we come into really the couple most important months of the year for single-family home turnover.
Yeah, well, the housing market's really been disrupted over the last several years since 2020. And what we are seeing is that the market is really slowly coming back into balance. Now, it was actually kind of set up for a nice recovery in the spring, and then then, as you said, the mortgage rates bumped upward because of new inflation concerns, and that puts a little bit of a hesitation in the mind of potential buyers. But what we're seeing in general is an increase in the number of homes on the market, so an increase in the availability. And when you look at mortgage rates now compared to where they were 2.5 years ago, there's just no comparison. It's just, we actually have seen improvements in affordability for the last 2.5 years. And part of it is because of lower mortgage interest rates, but really mostly it's about income growth that has exceeded house price growth.
Brad, something that stands out to me right now in the housing market is how geographically different it is. But I don't want to say bifurcated because it's not quite so simple, but the pressures you're seeing on home prices in the Sun Belt, for instance, not quite the same dynamic that you would see in my neighborhood in suburban New York City. Just talk a little bit about how we've started to see a real geographic separation, let's say, in the dynamics within each of these markets.
Yeah, well, as I said, it really started with the disruption of really the aftermath of COVID, where a lot of people moved. In some cases, they moved from the central parts of the city the city they were in to suburban parts, but in many cases, they moved to the Sun Belt, and that was so that they could get more space without spending a lot more money. But what we saw as a result was prices went up dramatically. And then home builders responded by providing supply where they could, which was basically in the Sun Belt area. So when we look at the price pressure right now in Sun Belt markets, it's because of the fact that the supply was inadequate and is now adequate again, and that's really a relief. When you look at cities in the Midwest and the Northeast, they didn't see the same supply response. In the Midwest, they didn't see the same surge in demand during COVID. So sometimes it looks like Midwestern cities are doing especially well, and what's really going on is that they are not making the adjustment from that supply response that cities in the Sun Belt are making. So we're really getting back into a normal market. But remember, we haven't really seen a normal housing market since 2018, 2019.
So double clicking a little bit on those dynamics in the Sun Belt, where you are seeing supply come online from projects that were probably conceived of 3, 4, 5 years ago. If I look at the stock market, I'm seeing home builder stocks have been under quite a bit of pressure. I think from a consumer standpoint, sticker price, things are looking better, but it feels like perhaps builders they've already grown more cautious and may have a little bit of an inventory overhang they were not really hoping to have if this kind of dynamic of rates 6% or so, and those migrationary flows really slowing down, like that might be a challenge, it seems, in the years ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. Home builders do have a little bit of an overhang, and so as a result, buyers who are willing to look in the new homes part of the market are able to talk with builders about price cuts and other incentives, and that makes that part of the market sort of a little bit easier to deal with than what we have seen in the existing homes market. Because in the existing homes market, there was a time when sellers were putting their house on the market, not even because they necessarily wanted to move, but they wanted to slap on a really high price and see whether they would get lucky. And some of them did. That is ending. And so what we're seeing in the broader existing homes part of the market is that buyers and sellers have much more balance, and so the negotiations are really meaningful negotiations. In the new homes part of the market, it's true, but home builders are under pressure, and that'll go away pretty soon. But right now, buyers are probably able to take some advantage of it.
All right, so maybe gone are the days when people are waiving their inspections, which was a feature of the 2022 housing market that felt like it was a little too much. But let's stay on existing home sales, and I want to talk about the lock-in effect, which has gotten a lot of play over the last few years, which is essentially folks who bought 2020, 21, very low mortgage rates, in a home that it seemed like I can't ever leave because of the rate I'm paying. Is that starting to ease in terms of bringing supply on the market? Are people saying, you know what, it's a good deal, but I don't think we're going to be here forever just to hang on to this mortgage?
Yeah, I think we are seeing the first signs that the mortgage lock is easing. Because, we remember that when people move, it's because life moves on. And in some cases, they are looking at better jobs in a different city or a different part of the city, so they want to move for that reason. In some cases, of course, it's because they're retiring. And so to some extent, people have been deferring the moves that they would ordinarily have taken. And now they're, as you said, they're saying, all right, things are reasonable. Let me go ahead and look at that move. So actually what we've seen recently is an increase in the number of houses put on the market available for purchase. And most recently, a fairly sharp decline in the number of refinance mortgage applications. And it may simply be that some of the people who would have been expected to refinance a year ago instead are thinking, all right, instead of refinancing, why don't I go ahead and put the house on the market because I am interested in moving.
And I'll get you out of here on this one, Brad. You mentioned earlier 2018-19, in your view, really the last time we saw a normal housing environment in the U.S. Two parts. One, when do you think that does return? I know we're seeing some of it, but do we need to see more changes to go all the way back? And I guess I was just kind of curious in your view, like what was defining that normal market, as someone who thinks a lot about the house I live in, future homes, and just what it means for an economist looking at the housing market to be in a quote unquote normal state.
Yeah, well, we look at certain metrics that describe any particular market, like the average number of days or the median number of days that a house spends on the market before it's bought, and the amount of supply relative to the sales pace, and the average or median discount of the final sales price to the list price on the house. And those were all in what I would call seller's market territory for the last few years. And they are now into the balanced territory. What really made 2018 and 2019 a normal market was that we finally completed a really long and hard recovery from the housing market downturn following the great financial crisis.